Before we begin, today's video is sponsored by my friends over at Vite Ramen, and I've got to be real with you guys. Everything's down right now across YouTube. Not just for me, but for pretty much all the Star Wars channels. Things are tough to survive, and without the support of Vite Ramen, I would be incredibly stressed. The ramen is not only providing delicious and nutritious food, but also for my family and my employees. Vite Ramen is an awesome company, though. You guys know. Just check the comments. I created my own flavor, Massaman Curry. We tested it forever. It's incredible. The best ramen I've ever tasted, and that's not an exaggeration. Here's a hint. Put a little less water in and add some peanut butter. But there are many other flavors to choose from. You can even get just the base noodles if you want to go completely all on your own. But right now, you can also use code ECKHARTS for 10% off, and you can also use Easy Health 2024 for free shipping. Make your health as easy as the ramen. And by the way, if you want to try Massaman but some other flavors, consider the Maximum Flavors Chef's Choice. As usual, you can check the link down in the description. Star Wars fans, I love all of you, or at least most of you. The ones who aren't mean to me, not still mad at Versus videos from a few years ago, you guys are great. Some of your opinions, though, we'll talk about them. So the recent rumor that's been floating around is that Star Wars is about to pull a Marvel and unveil a What If series. Now, whether that turns out to be true or not is ultimately immaterial, I think, for this conversation, because I gotta say, I was really surprised to see the fan reaction to this news. I mean, when I hear about Star Wars What If, I'm cool with that. I think it's a great idea, in fact. I'm so sorry, my baby is going insane. You'll hear that in the background. Anyway, to my surprise, I'd say that the big tweets, at least, that I saw about Star Wars What If were generally fairly negative. And I'm not going to include any names or anything in this video. These are just opinions. You don't need to prove them wrong. I'm just going to talk about why I disagree. But here are the few tweets that I saw. Cannot comprehend choosing to focus on a What If Star Wars series when there are so many sections of the actual canon timeline that desperately need fleshing out. Star Wars is a wide enough universe that canon stories deserve priority, IMO. That crying was not in the original tweet, by the way. Another one, put simply, a Star Wars What If show sounds awful. The final tweet, I actually talked a lot about the idea of a Star Wars What If project in the past, very much a slippery slope that I've never been particularly interested in. Visions is about as far as I'm willing to go. Plenty of Star Wars stories to tell without going the What If route. Now, those are all, of course, just opinions. I disagree, so let's talk about it. However, before I get into my thoughts, I do just want to give the caveat that when I talk about a Star Wars What If, I am not talking about alternate realities or alternate universes which are somehow connected to the main canon. I'm not talking about a scenario where the world between worlds allows all these what if situations to exist and where we have multiple timelines and stuff. I don't like that. I do, however, think that as Star Wars fans, we are overly tied to the idea of canon, and to me, this becomes more and more obvious as Star Wars is now nearly 50 years old and has moved beyond just the vision of one single person, that being George Lucas. I tweeted last night that, to me, I value canon in that it allows the telling of a deep, interconnected story, which is often the vision of a single person. I'm glad, and I really am, that Star Wars does have an organized continuity because we can tell those stories. We can have villains like Thrawn, we know their backstory. However, Star Wars is more than just the decisions made by single writers, multiple writers. It's themes, it's feeling, it's a myth at this point, and one of the interesting aspects of myths is how they move beyond simply their original story. I always do think the main Star Wars and should be at the forefront, but I see no reason why we have to stifle creativity and stifle storytelling by fitting everything into that one box. Star Wars Visions is an excellent example of this. The Ronin also, as a novel, is better than 90% of other new canon Star Wars books, maybe 95%. These are all stories that, frankly, we would not get to experience if we limited ourselves to canon-only storytelling. And if we look at the expanded universe, we see, again, that these other options are incredibly popular. And I mean, why wouldn't they be? Star Wars Infinities, the various Star Wars video games which gave you alternate endings. Even the Star Wars, which took George Lucas's original Star Wars script and reimagined that. Those are all non-canon storytelling devices, and they're all extremely extremely interesting. And I mean, as Star Wars fans, especially when you're younger, I feel like at some point everyone has sat down with their buddies and talked about what would have happened had X happened instead of Y. What if Darth Vader returned to the good side and didn't die? A Star Wars What If series would be taking that and just giving it some budget to play with. Nothing more, nothing less. It doesn't mean that the scenarios involved in any way detract from what quote unquote actually happened. It's all made up, just a reminder. In the canon, it's just a fun thing that fans get to enjoy. And that's partially why I'm so shocked that there's so much pushback against this. This isn't the Marvelization of the multiverse. This is individual projects meant to encourage fan discussion. And one of the responses, well, it is just fanfic. So is everything. George Lucas created Star Wars. George Lucas is no longer creating Star Wars. There's not some magical seed that he passed on to Disney when they bought the property, nor really when he allowed other directors and writers to work on his movies or TV shows, whatever. The idea of fanfic versus official material really just comes down to whether it's monetizable, and generally when it comes to Star Wars, like the scope of the project, obviously. There are just so many talented creatives in the space, and I would love to see kind of where their imagination takes them. That was one of the fun things about Star Wars Infinities. It starts off in a very basic way, and by the end of the comic, you're like, this is insane. We've got Yoda crashing a Death Star into Coruscant. By the way, I've covered all the Star Wars Infinities like way back at the beginning of my channel, but if you look it up, you can find them. I don't know, my focus has always been tell cool stories, don't shackle ourselves to canon. That's also true when it comes to things like video games. I've said it before, I don't think they needed to make The Force Unleashed fit into the rest of the canon, and to be fair, they never really did. Starkiller doesn't appear outside of The Force Unleashed, his feats aren't really compatible with the rest of canon, Force cloning is explicitly impossible in pretty much every other source, and I'm okay with that because the games are fun and it's worth it for that reason. None of that takes away from the continuity. I do think it helps to make things clear. George Lucas didn't care because he was going to make his movies, and whatever happened outside of that was fine. But if you take that approach, he doesn't care about the sequels either. He doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about the current continuity, and I just think that as fans, we need to be far more open because some of the best stories have the potential to emerge from really unlikely places. It's interesting because other fandoms, I think, do a good job of understanding this. The Shadow of Mordor games aren't canon to the rest of the Lord of the Rings universe, Tolkien's universe. It's not a part of the official, Tale of Middle-earth, but it's still cool. It's still good in its own right. And it being not canon doesn't make it lesser. And again, I'm going to point back to the myth. Someone gave me a really good example in one of the replies. I can't find it now, unfortunately. If it was you, let me know. He compared it to Hercules, how we all know the story of Hercules. Some probably know the original story quite well, but other Hercules stories are still fine and they're still really interesting. I think part of the what if scenario that's so fun is that you're also reimagining the original material that, I know if you're like me, I've watched Return of the Jedi 1,000 times. I used to watch it almost every day when I came home from school. It's just really interesting to take that work and change it. See how the butterfly effect works. That's half the fun. And again, Star Wars Visions, really incredible. The Ninth Jedi, everybody loved that. A Certain Point of View books, they're not strictly canonical. We talked about the vignettes from Star Wars Visionaries, also excellent. So I'll say open your mind. There's a lot out there. Don't shackle yourself to canon. The final tweet I put out was, this fake Space Wizard story isn't the same fake as the other fake Space Wizard stories, and it's kind of how I feel. Let me know your thoughts down below.